Hey everyone, it's Darren Sachs here to give you everything you need to know about not only how to pursue your passion for orchestral double bass, but also how to build a real viable career. Today, I'm really excited to be having the conversation we're about to have today because I've always believed in the importance of joining and participating in your local musicians union. After graduating from Boston Conservatory, joining the local union was the way that I got to learn about the music industry, learn about the importance of collective bargaining, and I became increasingly more selective with which gigs I decided to accept. I'm so glad to be joined by two leaders from the Boston Musicians Association, President David Rufino and board member Amelia Ames. Both of them have done amazing work in the realm of collective bargaining for musicians. Dave and Amelia, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks
so
for
So,
much.
having us.
yeah, glad to have you both here today. Um, I would like to start with Dave. What can you describe to my audience? A lot of them have heard about musicians unions. You know, oftentimes it comes up. You have other colleagues or other classmates that say, "Oh, well, you should join a musicians union." But many are confused as to what exactly a musicians union is, what it does. What is a musicians union?
Sure, I'll start. I'll give you an official definition of what a union is according to the US Department of Labor, and then I'll give you a more human definition after that. But the official definition they give is a labor union is an organized association of workers formed to protect and advance their common interests, such as better wages, benefits, and working conditions. Through collective bargaining with employers, these democratic organizations negotiate contracts to secure higher pay, safer environments, and better benefits for workers. So, a more human thought behind this is workers coming together and collaborating with each other and working in solidarity to be able to negotiate with their employers to improve our situation in the workplace. There's also a legal standing with that as well. When if it's just a group of workers coming together on their own, the management has no duty to recognize those members and what they do. However, if you are formed as a union and you have recognition as a union by the National Labor Relations Board, the management does have a legal duty to negotiate with you on your contract needs.
Yeah, so Amelia, I guess what would happen if there was not the presence of a musicians union as it pertains to orchestras that do have that are under union contract? What would happen if that union did not exist?
Well, I can speak to that. And first of all, thanks for having us. And it's nice to see you in this virtual realm. What would happen is the lack of protection and sort of the lack of, for lack of a better word, predictability. I think about how precious our time is and how respectful it is when people treat that time as valuable. And often when you are in a group that is not protected by a union contract, or have that relationship, maybe things will go over. Maybe, and you're just forced to sit there and you're one of a group of people. So it feels very uncomfortable if you're like, "Oh, I really need to go, but I don't want to lose my work here. I don't want to lose my privileges of getting to play my instrument for money," right? Like I feel so lucky to get to do that. You don't want to stick out. You don't want to put yourself out there. And a union has, not just the kind of protection and knowing that if you're, let's say they go over time or they mistreat you or they, that there are these pathways to register your complaints, you can get overtime if it goes late, just like any worker would be expected to. So I think it helps to both provide support and protection, but also a certain amount of legitimacy. And that this isn't just something that we do for fun. This is a very serious profession that takes a lot of work. It's very competitive to get to this point. And when you get to that point, it's important that our time and also our bodies are treated with respect, right? Like there's a certain amount of just understanding after a certain amount of time, we need a break, right? And that's in it that's going to be accounted for in a union contract. So I've played plenty of gigs where there wasn't that, and it's painful. You can risk injuring yourself. Or if you have a family and it runs over and you don't want to have to get up and leave, that can be very awkward. So, yeah, and I think Boston in particular is a really great city for the influence of the union in terms of showing what the standards are for those kinds of working situations.
Absolutely. And, I want to touch on something that you mentioned, Amelia, about, this being not just like a passion, but it's a career. And so many people are getting advanced degrees in this sort of thing. They're supposed to be, experts. They're a professional class, and so need to be treated as professional class. So, like Dave, what you've been in the greater Boston area and you've played for a number of both, union organizations, union orchestras. You've played together on, Cape Cod and other venues. And from your experience, or just kind of looking at how much various orchestras pay in the greater Boston area, what would be an example of what a non-union gig would ordinarily pay versus what unionized ensembles would pay? I think
Yeah,
for
that's
my
a
audience, I think for my audience, like they really want to see these numbers because sometimes they can be drastic.
yeah, that's a good question. And the good news is, due to all of the union action that we've had in Boston and all the union contracts, even some of the non-union groups have had to step up their game and pay. Most of them still pay far below what the union jobs pay, but they have had to kind of rise to what the union groups are expecting. But some of the union groups, you can get paid, well over $300 for a performance. This ranges because all of these rates are negotiated in what we do. But, some of the non-union gigs, I know I've seen things offering, $75 to $125 for a performance. And the union jobs typically pay more. There's also access to our union pension fund, and then just other benefits that we can get through collective bargaining. So the standards are really there. I mean, we have things written into our contracts about when breaks are going to happen, like Amelia mentioned. We even negotiate terms such as ideal temperature ranges. And it's always a strange thing to negotiate with an employer, the temperature range, but it's important not just for the comfort of people, but also so many of our instruments, particularly woodwind instruments. When you blow hot air through an instrument in a room that could be, if it's 58 degrees in that room, there's actually danger in damaging that instrument. So there is workplace safety for both our bodies, as Amelia had mentioned, but also for our instruments that we put into play. So there's a lot of discussion that we can go, and many of the non-union groups don't consider these things. Or even if they consider them, there's no mechanism to kind of question what's happening if some of these conditions are not met.
Yeah, and then what happens? Like, for example, what kind of standards might they have? Like when you say temperature standards, uh, what does that look like in terms of? Is there like a certain temperature on they say on the contract that the hall can't go above?
Yeah, typically, we'll say some of our contracts will say uh, maybe somewhere between 68 and 75 degrees. So if the temperature falls below 68, are we necessarily going to shut the gig down? No, not necessarily. But what it does spur is it enables that if the management knows that the hall is cold, then they should be hopefully taking actions to remedy that situation. And if they can't remedy it, they can have a conversation with the musician representative. So when we're talking about orchestra work, all of our union orchestras have what's known as an orchestra committee. And these are elected members of the orchestra who are elected to represent the musicians in the orchestra. So typically, again, if something happens, if the temperature is 67 degrees, are we going to shut the gig down? No, probably not. If it does get to 62 degrees and it's physically cold, then that conversation needs to be had with the orchestra committee and discuss what happens. And real human negotiations happen in real time, and everyone kind of decides collectively of what we're going to do. So it's not, the union's not demanding a certain thing, but these these conditions are negotiated for a reason, and it is important to uphold our standards where we can.
Yeah, and like Amelia, what kinds of ensembles might my listeners be familiar with that have collective bargaining agreements, CBA? By the way, just to clarify for my audience, whenever we use the term CBA, we're referring to collective bargaining agreements. And maybe Amelia, can you share what types of ensembles will have union agreements like that?
Um, well, all the best orchestras, as it happens, right? I think that if it's a very high level ensemble, they know that there's this kind of negotiation, this kind of relationship of a professional nature is important to have. And I can name one right off the bat that just ratified our CBA, and that's Vista Philharmonic Orchestra, which is based in Groton. And an interesting thing about that is that that's actually not under the BMA. That's under that's with a local in Fitchburg. So you kind of learn your geography when you get into this world a little bit. Like it's interesting to see which groups are part of which locals, which and how that maps out. In terms of in Boston, there's Boston Modern Orchestra Project. The ballet, Handel and Haydn Society, the Boston Symphony. Dave could probably name a bunch more.
In addition to symphony orchestras, we also represent theaters. So there's some independent theaters. Some of these are theaters that bring in traveling shows that will employ local musicians. Really, we can look into just about any type of ensemble that we want. There are some chamber ensembles that may want some sort of an agreement with the union. And again, one reason why some groups do opt to do this, especially independent groups or independent chamber ensembles, is to gain access to the pension fund and to add that benefit to people that are playing with them.
Mm. Why would you say like if you can go kind of through some recent things. First of all, this is my first time finding out about the Vista Philharmonic. That's great news to hear about that. So, the Vista Philharmonic plays out in Fitchburg, and they have are they still at Groton Hill Center? I think is that their performing space
They play in Groton, yeah.
in Groton, and so they have like
In
a
Groton.
very professional looking setting. I mean, it's a just it's a full orchestra hall basically, right?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just built a few years ago, and one of the lovely aspects of that hall being built is that the donor who gave a lot of money to have it built had a proviso written into his alongside his donation that he wanted it to be for this orchestra in particular. So while we're not a full-time orchestra, we only do I think maybe 6 or 7 programs a year. So the hall has to be filled that they have lots of touring groups come through. It's just nice to know that
Yeah,
and
sorry, Amelia. I think we're
it
breaking
was
up for a
built
second. Yeah,
fully
go
of,
ahead.
of central Massachusetts and Groton in particular. And it's this beautiful piece of land, but it really feels like home. And that orchestra. Oh, sorry, did it break up?
Yeah, just a little bit. It broke up there a bit.
Can you
Uh,
hear me?
yeah, no, I
Oh,
can.
okay.
We can
I'm
hear you.
gonna open the door again. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Um, it used to be a community orchestra that was sort of half professional, half amateur, and it was called Orchestra of Indian Hill. And over the years, it sort of became just more and more professional. And I think they had a vote to organize maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and a very small percentage voted for it. But this time when we held the vote last year, it was like more than 80%. So just kind of shows how the ensemble has changed over the years.
Amelia or David, do either of you know offhand like what types of musicians are playing in this? Are these new conservatory graduates? Are like, what is the ensemble comprised of?
In all
Well,
of our groups, it's a bit of a mix. I'm not going to speak to Vista in particular, but I imagine it's the same mix. You have some people that have been playing in the orchestra for 40 years, and some people who are new conservatory graduates, and everything in between. So I know that was, the story that Amelia told about Vista is not an uncommon story. That was the same case with many of the other orchestras that have organized under the BMA in the past 15 years, including Cape Cod and New Bedford and Portland Symphony, where years ago these were community orchestras that slowly became professional. And some of them have been professional orchestras for a long time, but they're only newly union orchestras within the last 15 years. But again, you have a mixture in all those groups of people that have been there for many, many years, as well as people who, in some cases, are still in school.
What does the process look like for those who are how do you take a community orchestra and that's comprised of either players who've been in the orchestra for many years, many seasoned players, or conservatory grads, current conservatory students? How do they take that orchestra or semi-professional orchestra and turn that into a union orchestra under collective bargaining agreement? Like, what does that process look like?
That can be a long process, but if you find yourself playing in an orchestra where they're paying you money to play and you think that the conditions can be better, or you want to be part of the conversation and the future of that organization, uh, and you're interested in union representation, the first thing you should do is reach out to your local union, and they can guide you through that process. It does that's where we get into what we talk about in the union world. The word we use a lot is organizing. So we are organizing. It really starts out the early levels is having conversations with people, learning to hear if your fellow musicians feel the same way you do. If you find that if you're the only person in the orchestra that feels a certain way, then you might be alone. But if you start talking to your colleagues and you start finding that many of your colleagues are thinking the same things you are or feel the same way you are, then that may be a time to consider, getting a union involved and being part of that. And it's, people get worried about this, but all it is, you're allowing yourself to be part of the conversation. And I came to this in that same way. I was helped organize the Cape Cod Symphony. Someone approached me about it. I kind of nervously got involved because it's taking a big risk putting yourself out there, but the rewards in doing that have been great. So it was a big risk, but I really feel rewarded for doing that. And I've learned so much more about the union since I've been involved in that union work. When I was just a musician playing gigs, it was kind of like, something I paid dues to. But as I've become involved in the work of the union, I mean, I see how valuable it can be and the work we do. And I meet union leaders from across the country that are really passionate and working hard and really do want what's best for all of the musicians working. I mean, I think sometimes people don't believe that, but it really is true that we do this work because we want to make everyone's lives better and their ability to make a living better. And maybe
Yeah,
Amelia can speak to her experiences in her stewardship.
yeah. Well, thanks, Dave. I apologize. There might be some noise here. We just have all the windows open because it's so hot. I'm Darren. I'm brand new on the board, so I just was elected in the election in December, and so I'm learning so much. And I feel like that was I ran both because I feel like everybody should take their turn, as Dave used the word stewardship. That this is a community I care very much about, and I think we want to make things better for us, but also for future musicians, so that when we're working on these kinds of wage scales and cartage and all the kinds of things that we work on when we're negotiating and when we're discussing the rules for our union, that's for future musicians as much as it is for us. And I'm so thankful for all the past people who worked in the union and they say, like, thank the labor movement for the weekend, right? Like, there's all these things that we've gotten thanks to past union stewards. And just a couple weeks ago, I was at a conference so I'm a violist, and it was the American Viola Society. And I had a bunch of friends I've known from way back who were in the leadership there, and they were kind of like, well, when are you going to get involved? And I was like, you know what, right now, this is what I'm taking my time with the local union because I care about Boston, and I think it's such an incredible community here. And I will say, Darren, I've probably said this to you. I don't know if I sound like a broken record, but I'm from New York, and I feel like the level here is just so much higher. There's just such a great scene for music, and at some point maybe I'll put in my dues as a, working on the Viola Society. But I'm happy to be part of this team here in Boston.
How do you, Amelia, when you're comparing, not to put, I'm originally from New York, and I'm not going to have this whole rivalry discussion. I will not, I won't get into that, but but you do seem to feel that the Boston Musicians Association has done a lot of great work. Why do you feel so strongly that our particular local here has really done an impeccable job?
Well, I think the proof is in the work that's here for us freelancers, and the fact that the standards and the wage scales are adopted and accepted by so many ensembles in town, that it's like Dave was saying, that you'll get an offer for a gig, and they'll say we pay union wage scale 1, even if they don't have a CBA. Maybe it's a one-off, a community chorus thing, and they're just putting it together, but they know that this is what the going rates are. And I feel like it's made such good relationships with the ensembles that that there are a number of good freelance gigs. I joined the BMA as a student when I was at NEC, so that I could play with, I think it was BMOP, I forget, but I did a few different gigs in town, and it was just understood that if you want to work with these ensembles, sorry, you need to be a member. And so, but when I was in New York, I felt like the union there was there for the very high level gigs, for the Broadway and the playing on, the late night shows, and there's a lot of amazing work like that. And then everything that wasn't that was like $50 a service way out in Staten Island, and just shocking for the biggest city in our country to have just this wild west scene of, and it felt like there wasn't, and maybe that was, I moved here 13 years ago, so hopefully things have changed, and hopefully the local 802 has reached out to a lot of other ensembles in the area. It was just my experience that it felt like, wow, you're expecting me to go where and for how much, and then they're going to go late and not, sorry to keep harping on this late thing. I just
New Yorkers, listen up.
Yeah. I mean, it's and of course I love New York. It's where I was born, and I'm not going to get into it with the rivalry, but just in terms of the musical scene here, it feels like the audiences are very supportive of lots of different kinds of things. There's a real entrepreneurial spirit in ensembles in Boston. If you think about how many groups were like created by the people who are still leading them, whether it's a Far Cry or BMOP, even of blessed memory, Boston Philharmonic with Benjamin Zander. I mean, he started that, and so there's this openness to lots of different kinds of groups, and it feels like the union has really made good inroads, so that like a diversity of groups can have that higher wage, higher expectations.
Yeah, and the other thing is I hate to go to another discussion here, but also a lot of the musicians who are following my channel, a lot of them are either in high school and thinking about going the conservatory route, or they're in conservatory, or they're just graduating conservatory and they're trying to navigate the transition into professional life. And there's oftentimes, you will hear discussions about what, is it a good time to join the union now? Should you wait until you have your first union gig to join? Why should new graduates or people who are about to perform in the professional scene, should they pay membership, or why should they pay membership if they don't currently play for any organizations with CBAs?
That's always a tricky question, and something that a lot of people want to know. So it's an important one to ask. But I know for myself, I joined while I was still in school. I wasn't out there doing, working under collective bargaining agreements at that time. I believed personally that if I'm going to be a professional musician, I should be a member of the musicians union. And one of the things that joining our union does is you're likely going to have to do it at some point anyway. So that's one reason. But the other reason too is it is a way to help you network, get yourself out there, especially if you show up to union meetings. That's a good way to start getting to know people and to have people see your face. I mean, our local, we have at least 3 general membership meetings per year. So that is a way that a lot of musicians are able to show up to those meetings and they meet people there. Some of those people are the people that are hiring. So it's a good time to meet people, get your face in there, get your name hopefully published in, something that we're trying to start to do in our own thing is when we put out our newsletters, start to publish the names of new members and maybe start doing profiles of new members. I know when I joined, that was something that was happening in the newsletter. I remember there was a short bio of me when I first joined. So it's a way for people in town to start to get to know who you are as you start expanding your reach. So to me, it's always a good time to join the union. If you're still in school, here's the plug I'll give you is if you're a student, our student scale, our student rate, actually we waive your initiation fees. So typically when you join the union, you pay membership dues, and then the first time you join, you have to pay a local initiation fee to the union local you're joining, as well as a federation initiation fee to the AFM as a whole. And if you join as a student, we actually waive all those initiation fees. So if you join as a student, you can actually save, probably about $90 to $100, depending on what those fees are in your locals, a little over $100 in some cases when you join as a student. So if you're a student and you're on the fence, it'll actually save you money to join while you're still a student than if you wait 2 months till you graduate.
I think that even for me, right? Like when I was in conservatory, when I was graduating conservatory, um, and I had to transition into a professional career. Um, Joining the union was incredibly beneficial for me because at that time I had made the decision just after graduation to still continue taking lessons. In one case, I was taking lessons with the principal of the Portland, Maine Symphony, which is under BMA, has a CBA, and I was studying with him and other musicians. And during COVID, um, a lot of musicians had moved out of the Boston area. There wasn't much in terms of playing, and so they started calling down the sub list. And thankfully, when I'd get there were principal players that wanted to invite me to play through their personnel managers, and they would ask me directly whether I was part of the union. And so I was glad that I had the membership at the time. Otherwise, I might not have gotten those opportunities. But that leads me into like when musicians go to any of these union meetings, what are some topics and conversations that these musicians should really be paying attention to, really listening in on? Is there a section where they talk about predatory hiring practices or other things that musicians should be aware of?
We do try to get a lot of information out, and even in our newsletters, if there are bad employers that we know are out there trying to hire people and exploit the work they do, we'll sometimes publish those in our newsletters. At our meetings in particular, sometimes we have things that we're voting on that have to do with the governance of our union local. So you have a kind of a direct voice in that democracy. I mean, you have a real good chance of your voice having an impact on just kind of the rules and regulations of our local. So that's what happens at least once a year. We'll have a meeting where we're voting on different things, and that's at the wage scale. So even voting on how much should we get paid as musicians, like what should we be expecting with pay? That doesn't just come from someone passing that me as the president saying this is how much all musicians should get paid. This is a democratic voting that people do that say this is what we all believe that we should get paid for certain types of work. Other meetings, may just be informational where we're telling you things, updating you on things that are happening in the local. One thing that I would like to do, and my predecessor did this as well, but I want to start getting in on some of this too, is maybe bringing in guest speakers who can speak to our members, people that are of interest. One that I thought of is uh, something that's important for musicians is, our ear health. Could we bring in an audiologist to kind of speak to people about general ear health and things that you should be doing and precautions you should be taking and the importance of wearing earplugs to save your hearing so when you get old you can still hear okay. So some of these things are ideas that I have. Amelia has shared a lot of great ideas with me of different topics that we could maybe present to our members. So we have a lot of ideas of things that we can bring to this, even possibly doing webinars for our members and even for our non-members, because some of these, we do want to support the musical world as a whole as well. And we hope that people will join us, even if they don't have to, but it's important for us to take care of musicians all over.
Yeah, I guess the question for both of you, and even Amelia, you can chime in on this too, is sometimes we'll have, for example, in my experience, right, where I've heard stories through other musicians of them receiving a high profile gig. Maybe there's a famous musician who's playing at TD Garden, or there's something very, very high profile. It can fill a stadium, can fill a concert hall, but they're offering low pay in proportion to what that artist brings or what that organization brings. And so I was just wondering, are there any red flags that, for example, maybe someone in conservatory, if they receive this gig, that they should maybe question it and maybe make a phone call to the local?
I would say one red flag is when there's the fee that's offered is just sort of like a package fee and isn't itemizing what it's for. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I'll get these offers and it's like this rehearsal, concert, blah, and then it's $450. And it's like maybe on its face, 450. Okay, but then when you start dividing it and it just like I would rather know like, okay, this is a 2.5 hour rehearsal, so we this is gonna be that. And it feels predatory to just kind of put the big number without, and I think especially if you're young, you don't know necessarily to go through that. And actually that's a lot of work for not a lot of money. And the other thing is the flip side of that is sometimes I'll get offered things like that and there's no number attached. And it's like, you want me to say yes to this without knowing what you're paying me? Should I be so excited that you want me to play with Elton John? I don't know, that
Yeah.
I'm just going to say yes without knowing, like that feels very unprofessional. So I think, if you feel like you're not being treated like a professional that you are, because it's, important to factor in that it's not just the hours of driving there and playing, right? It's the hours and hours of practice that we put in and instrument maintenance and all this other stuff that goes into what we do, so that the per minute or per hour fee is actually much lower when you factor all that in. So I guess I'm old enough now that I've become more skeptical about those kinds of offers. They can be very, very fun, but they also can be a huge drag. You're not going to be the one getting to hang out with Weird Al or whatever, somebody who came through that I got to play with through. And I think that was a union gig, but there was, it's just to have kind of a realistic sense of what it's really going to be. And just because it's a big name doesn't necessarily guarantee that the employer is going to be treating the musicians fairly at all.
Yeah, I mean, but some people might say in my audience, well, if I go play for them, I get the experience. What do you say for the student who feels like they would benefit from having the experience, even though they can potentially be working for free or underpaid?
Yeah, I think they deserve both. I mean, they can get the experience, but they still deserve to be paid what they're worth. As Amelia hit on too, for your audience and for all of us on the call, I know for me, I spent 6 years in school getting a bachelor's and a master's degree. I left school with a lot of debt. I owed a lot of money when I got out. Many of your viewers may have that as well. I spent a lot of time in the practice room, which no one was paying me for. I still do spend a lot of time in the practice room, and I still don't get paid for that. So when you are off on those jobs, you do deserve to get paid, as was mentioned early in this call, as the professional that you are. We think of all the professional services that we may need to hire, whether it's a lawyer or a plumber or an accountant. They don't they may love their job. They probably do. Hopefully they do. I hope everyone loves whatever job they're doing, but they also expect to get paid what they're worth and what the market will bear for what they do. So, we shouldn't be any different as musicians. Just because we love what we do, all of us, I don't think you could be a musician, professional musician, without loving it, but we still deserve to be paid as professionals.
Absolutely. And so, it always just makes me think of why why do we do this? And occasionally I feel like being in this field, oftentimes it's sort of communicated to me at times that, well, if you're trying to get paid, if you're trying to get paid fairly, sometimes they say, well, it just feels like even though they might not be saying, sometimes they say it to me, sometimes they're not necessarily, it's like indirect, but the vibe that I get sometimes is that you should be focusing like on the beauty of the art, and that the earnings you get, or wanting more money for what you do, gets in it kind of dilutes the art. And I disagree with that, because oftentimes what I notice is that musicians who get paid what they deserve are able to invest more in their artistry and become better artists.
I mean, you can't take art to the supermarket and buy food with your art, right? I mean, it's a matter of survival. So that's beautiful. It's beautiful. And we are, like I said, I feel so lucky to do this. But I also think there's people who are, yeah, like Dave was saying, if you're playing a concert, it's, everybody might be lucky to be in that space with this super famous person, but I don't think the ushers are expected to be volunteering their time, or the caterers or whatever. So why would we be expected to? And, I'm going to go a little bit out on left field here, but this is a story that I really love, that something that my mom said to me when I was in grad school at NEC. It was during the protests against I think it was the second Gulf War, or when we first went into Iraq. And I was dating a guy at the time who was a saxophonist, and he was out of school. He was already professional. And he was like, "Man, I feel like what I do is so meaningless. Like, I wish I could just be out there protesting all the time," or something like that. And I said that to my mom, and she was like, "Doesn't he know that the reason they're protesting is so that we can have a country where he can do that as a living," right? Like, think about how many places on this earth you can't be a professional musician because there isn't that infrastructure, because there, it is, of course, it's a privilege, but it's also, it's a sign of what our society values, right? And if our society didn't value it, it makes it harder, as we all know. And and I think, Darren, for your audience, maybe you have some viewers who are not interested in a career playing orchestra music, and maybe you're interested in making more creative music or improvising or what have you. There's obviously a giant world of music that you can play, and I would say all the more reason we want to diversify our members in the union, right? Like, it's not just about the CBAs for the orchestra. We want to be here for every corner of the music world, and to show that saxophone playing, that klezmer playing, that Turkish music, the Irish folk, that it's all so important and so necessary, and that the work is valuable.
Absolutely, especially if they're playing in major theaters as well. We have oftentimes I've been blessed that, even though I of course have not played for the Boston Symphony, but we oftentimes, one thing that's been very popular lately is they've been having these sort of video game orchestras that come to Symphony Hall. And they've been a huge hit in the city and around the world. They're incredibly fun to play with. But I'm grateful that they have a collective bargaining agreement contracts. What is it? It's Boston Music Management or one of those organizations. Will contact us, and they form an orchestra with local members to go play for these events that come up at Symphony Hall like that. But it goes back to like what my wife has always said to me whenever I've talked to her about making money as a musician and thinking about your earnings. Like, how can you make the music if you have a hungry stomach? And I think that really sums it up. Like, how can you create for everyone who's saying, you shouldn't think about money as a musician, but like, how can you make music? How can you make art if you're not living?
Yeah.
Which Amelia, I know you've brought up as far as things about consensus and organizing, but I think also this leads into there's been a lot of anti-labor efforts around the country, and so one of those things that has been popular in various states is the term right to work. And Dave, I wonder if you can share in my audience how right to work, what it is, and how it impacts the ability for the labor unions to do its work in bargaining for musicians' wages.
Sure. Yeah. Right to work is whoever came up with that slogan was a genius, because it kind of, in a lot of ways, means the opposite. In the states that are right to work states, unions have less power and less rights, and they do have to work a lot harder for what they do. In many of those states, the wages are significantly lower than they are in states that are not right to work states that have more union recognition. So this is one thing we see across the board, that union workers typically make more money than non-union workers, and it's the same thing in areas with high union density. The average salaries are typically higher. Again, right to work, it's a genius slogan, but it really means the exact opposite. In some ways, you're losing some of your rights. And the unions are at a real disadvantage there. And I've spoken to many union leaders that are working union right to work states. And the ones that are successful, I have so much respect for, because they really are, they don't have the wind at their backs. So,
So from what I understand about right to work, basically, essentially, this goes for all the unions, but in the context of a musicians union, someone can join an orchestra without paying the union dues, even though that orchestra has a collective bargaining agreement. But the union depends, in order to collectively bargain, they depend on that funding through membership fees. What would happen to the organization if they're not collecting the membership fee?
well, it's again, that's what it's kind of an unfair thing, because that musician who chooses not to join the union is reaping all of the benefits of that negotiation. And it actually, I think in some of those organizations, their contracts aren't as strong because they don't have that support. There are some organizations that are in right to work states that do have 100% union participation, and those are the ones that come out with the best contracts. The ones who don't, sometimes their contracts probably aren't as strong as they could be. So I encourage you, if you are in a right to work state and you're a member of an orchestra that's a union orchestra, even if you don't have to be a member of that union, I would recommend that you do. Those are your colleagues that are negotiating those contracts for you. You know that they're people that care about you and they're working hard, and your membership and your support in them will help you get a better contract, which will help you in the long run. So, and I encourage you to, if you don't have any trust, try to get involved in running that union as well. Be involved in being in that orchestra committee that's going to negotiate the contracts. So it sets things up in a difficult way. But I think, again, if you find yourself in that situation, I encourage you to join that union and give that support, because I think that you will turn out with a better situation for yourself and for all of your colleagues.
Yeah, not to mention that, in reality, even if you're not legally responsible for in those states for paying the union dues. You really do have to pay the union dues because of the fact that it's almost like it's not as much an option. It's more like not tipping like when you go to a restaurant, you wouldn't go without tipping your wait staff. Like they need that in order to survive. The folks who are making it possible for you to have the pay that you're getting, that is the union, that is, everyone involved. That's your officers, that's the president, that's everything that's involved in the union. In order to continue that work, it must stay alive. It's not a donation. It's really for your survival.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said right there. That's hitting the nail right on the head. So
Dave, Amelia, thank you so much for coming on. I'll be respectful of the time. And
Oh,
I think that this has been a very important conversation. I think that the listeners really got a lot out of today's conversation.
I just want to give a quick plug if I can. So if you want to look into us, if you're in the Boston area, we're bostonmusicians.org. We have some social media posts, so you can look us up on social media. For the AFM, they are afm.org. Look them up. We offer a little bit of everything for everyone. So our collective bargaining agreements, we talked a lot about that. We also have things that are single engagement contracts. So if you're booking your own gigs independently, we have contracts that you can use to protect yourself. If you're recording your work and you're a creator in that way, we have contracts that can protect your recorded work as well. So we have a lot that we can do for you, especially in this age of AI, where you might put out something on YouTube or an audio recording. That work, if it's not protected, can get fed into these AI learning models. And you have corporations that are going to be making billions of dollars off of your work, and you're entitled to compensation for that, or for your work to not be included in that at all. So keep that in mind. But yeah, thank you, Darren, for having both of us on here. It was a pleasure to speak with you and your audience.
Absolutely. Thank you
thank
too,
you so much,
Amelia, as well.
Aaron. Yeah, what a pleasure. And I can't wait to see if there are any comments. If there, does this get posted in a place where if there's questions, we can answer them? I'd be happy to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this will be on, I mean, the whole video will be on YouTube, and then segments of the episode will also be in on my Instagram as well.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone.